Hound Companions are the robotic dogs you can unlock by defeating the Sisters of Parvos. They have modular components, just like with Moas, but the Hounds come with their own unique line of weapons. So how good are they? And what's the best way to set one up? I'm the Engineer, let's solve a practical problem. This video will go over the components that make up a Hound, what their precepts do, which setups and mods are ideal, and a comparison of their power to some other companions. Let's start with the Hound components. There are 4 parts to a Hound: the model, core, bracket, and stabilizer. These components affect the stats of the Hound, its appearance, and what mods it comes with initially. You can get blueprints for specific components during a Sisters of Parvos showdown mission, and you will also get a random, fully built Hound from defeating your Sisters of Parvos in the showdown mission. The component blueprints are tradable between other players. The model determines the head shape of your Hound, as well as which weapon it comes with and which audit precept mod it comes with. The core determines the body of the Hound and alters the base health, armor, and shield stats. The bracket determines the legs of the Hound and applies a modifier to the base armor, health, and shields, as well as determining which denial precept mod you get. Lastly, the stabilizer determines the tail type, the bonus innate polarity, and the prospectus precept the Hound comes with. Despite all of the Hound specific precept mods coming from specific Hound parts, they can be used with any Hound once you have acquired the mod, regardless of the components. As a result then, the choice of Hound parts doesn't relate to the mods, aside from just getting your initial collection of all 9 precepts. The same is true of the Hound Weapons, with all 3 melees being completely interchangeable once unlocked. The distinctions then are the hit point stats for your chosen Hound and the bonus polarity. In terms of the hit points, they don't really matter, as you'll usually be using link mods to give them loads of health and armor anyway, and as for the bonus polarity, you can always add on more using Former. If you want to min-max, you can go for any model with the Raiju core, Ergo bracket, and 1 stabilizer. In reality, the best Hound is the one that has Former and an Orokin reactor in it. On to the precepts. They come in 3 groups: Prospectus, Denial, and Audit. You can equip up to 1 from each category on a Hound, though there is no requirement to use any of them if you don't want to. For Prospectus, the choices are Focused, Synergized, and Aerial. The Focus precept will periodically generate a channeled fire beam at a target, locking the Hound into this attack whilst the beam is active. At max rank, this will deliver 22 heat procs, as well as a low to modest amount of heat damage. This beam is blocked by terrain, allies, and even other enemies. Although if it is blocked by an enemy, they'll be taking the damage and procs instead. This precept also has a very high knockback, pushing the target away from the Hound. The Synergized Prospectus periodically launches a bright electric orb that bounces between targets, applying a small amount of electric damage and an electric proc. Due to the AoE nature of electric procs, the damage scales up in dense encounters somewhat. The Hound is still able to move and act immediately after launching this orb, giving it more freedom than the Focus precept. On top of that, the electric proc being applied to many enemies is more useful to yourself and the Hound for damage scaling from status overload effects. The third Prospectus is Aerial Prospectus, and that has the Hound launch a targeting beacon at a nearby enemy. A couple seconds after the beacon connects with the ground, an orbital strike lands, dealing blast damage and knockdown. The damage isn't great. Despite the similarities to Vauban's Photon Strike, it doesn't have damage scaling with level. On top of this, with the delay, enemies that are moving can easily get out of the area of effect unintentionally before it even lands. Of these 3, I'd strongly suggest using Synergized if you're going for a Prospectus at all. Most meta setups do not use electric procs, meaning this will usually give you an additional status for status overload mods. The next set then are the Denial precepts: Diversified, Evasive, and Reflex. Diversified Denial periodically splits the Hound into 3 smaller versions, dealing 85% of the Hound's melee damage each. This is a relatively solid survival tactic for the Hound, and no small amount of distraction for the enemies too. It's also comparatively rather powerful for damage dealing. Not only do you get around 2.5 times the original damage per second at base, but you also get 3 times the original status per second, which will help condition overload scale up. A downside, however, is that while split like this, the Hound cannot use its Prospectus and Audit abilities. This makes Diversified a solid denial precept, but an occasional hindrance to the other precepts. Evasive will periodically teleport the Hound out of danger and give it a brief period of 75% evasion. I've not been able to nail down exactly how it chooses where to teleport to, but it doesn't seem to teleport to an actually safe location. And given that my Hound has gone down more times using this precept than any other in testing, I cannot recommend it at all. And lastly, Reflex Denial will periodically give the Hound a transparent dome shield, reflecting most damage back to their attackers. Reflection damage is pretty much useless outside of specific circumstances, so that's no real benefit to us here. Worse still, the shield will also block your own shots. As the Hound likes to get up close and personal with enemies, this literally creates a wall over the enemy, denying you from engaging them. So just like Evasive, don't use this precept. Practically speaking then, there's only one good denial precept, and even then it's a mediocre ability overall. If you choose to skip any particular precept, denial should probably be the one to skip. The final set then are the Audit precepts, Equilibrium, Repo, and Null. Equilibrium Audit periodically sends out bright waves which knock down nearby enemies and deals a token amount of damage. While doing this, the Hound is locked into the animation during the precept activation. This is a very visually noisy ability for something of relatively little use, so I'm just going to immediately recommend against it. Repo Audit periodically emits a magnetic wave. Enemies that are both in range and in line of sight take a magnetic proc and are permanently disarmed. Not only does this reduce many dangerous targets to much less dangerous melee, it also applies less used status proc, which is useful for status overload mods, just like the electric proc from Synergized Prospectus. The line of sight requirement does hamstring the ability a fair bit, but it still functions well without much fuss. And then Null Audit steals an Xmas aura from a nearby Xmas unit once every minute. The target permanently loses their aura, while the Hound gains the aura for up to a minute with a maxed mod. For most auras, this is a mild benefit at best, such as being able to do the Arson Xmas heat shockwave and making enemies a bit more vulnerable to heat damage. However, should your Hound steal an Arctic Xmas aura, it will create a snow globe around itself, which functions just like Frost's snow globe, in that you cannot shoot through it from the outside. For all the mild benefits an Xmas aura may bring, having your companion frequently just block your shots is still very frustrating. This ability doesn't even help the Hound, as it'll charge into melee anyway, bringing all of the enemies inside of the globe so they can now still attack it. Out of the Audit options, I'd strongly recommend Repo for the status proc and permanent disarming. Now, the Hounds can use more than just the Hound specific precepts. They otherwise have access to all the same mods as Moa companions without the Moa specific precepts. So a pair of link mods such as Link Health and Link Armor will do wonders to help keep your companion alive in most missions. Medi-Pet Kit is a crucial one in giving your Hound some health regeneration and a much longer bleed out time. Vacuum and Primed Animal Instinct just go on every companion build. And then add on Simp Fiber, going a long way to help keeping your Hound alive by doubling its armor, and it synergizes with Warframe builds using Equilibrium for the energy gain. This already is 6 out of the 10 mod slots used up on a Hound. With your other slots, you can fill them how you see fit to get support from your Hound. I'm not one for meticulously updating companion builds for every single mission and faction, so a simple all-rounder is to use Guardian for the immediate shield restore, and Medi-Ray for the passive health recovery. You can drop the Medi-Ray if you have a different healing source, of course. For the remaining slots, we can then look to the Hound precepts, for which I'd go Synergized Prospectus, Repo Audit, and Diversified Denial in that order of priority. The reason I'm not being overly specific with this build is because there's no reason to be. A Hound can steal the occasional Xmas aura, or throw out a couple of electric procs, maybe make a few modulated growling noises, and that's about it. You can compare this then to other companions and their utilities. Smeeta Cavats can double your affinity and resource pickups, with rare chance to stack those doubles. Carrier can give you an incredible ammo reserve and passively loot all nearby crates. Helios will just scan everything. Panzer will put out viral procs everywhere and save you from death. Kubros can turn slash weapons into nukes. Even Moas can hack terminals for you, if they feel like it. In terms of utility, Hounds just don't have it. So that brings us then to one final aspect of Hounds, their melee weapons. They have 3 unique weapons, only compatible with the Hounds: the Lacerten, Batoten, and Akaten. They have virtually identical stats, except for the split of their base damage types. Either 50-50 puncture, 50-50 impact, or 50-50 impact puncture. Slash is just the most useful of the physical damage types, taking top priority. Out of impact and puncture, neither are amazing. However, puncture does have a bonus against armor, and its proc will reduce the damage an enemy deals, which can help a little bit to keeping your Hound alive. With impact procs not being useful to a Hound because they can't do mercy kills, this means that the Akaten with the slash puncture type is the best one, but by a slim margin. As a melee weapon, the Hound can be modded with ordinary melee mods. Well, except all of the ones which make melee good. You see, there's no combo, so there's no blood rush or weeping wounds. The Hounds don't have an attack speed or range stat to modify, so modifiers for those are useless. There are no set mods like the Gladiator set or the Sacrificial set. Instead, what you've got is Condition Overload and then just the core basic melee mods. Let's compare it in action to its closest competition, a Moa. For testing purposes, I'll have them face a squad of 6 elite lancers, 6 troopers, and 2 heavy gunners, all of them at level 100. I'll keep the companion invulnerable. After 3 runs, the average time for the Hound to kill them all was 4 minutes and 41 seconds, while for the Moa, using Verglass, it's 1 minute and 7 seconds. This means that Moas, and by extension Sentinels, have vastly better kill times. Moas can be revived like Hounds, and they use virtually all the same mods. And despite being objectively superior to the Hounds, we just don't see them in action because they're not really that good either. The Hound specific mods are a combination of weak attack options, weak or even detrimental defense options, and a couple quirky bits aside. Basically, the only reason to use a Hound is because you want a robotic Hound as a companion. And that's fine if you do, it's just there's no pretending they're even remotely good. Alright then, that is that when it comes to everything about the Hound companions from the Sisters of Parvos. If you have found this video helpful, do give it a like, and subscribe as well to catch more as I upload it. This video was highly requested on my Discord, so if you've got a topic you'd love to see covered, or just want to join the community, the link is in the video description. That's all for now though, so as always, level Hounds, promptly forget them, and fight well, Tenno.